I believe.
I believe. I believe.
Good morning again, everyone. So as the intro alludes to, we're actually doing a series of teachings, and it's a 30-week series of teachings called Believe. It is a look at, and it is a take on what are the core and key things that the Christian faith really claims, does, and should show. We're really looking at the 10 core beliefs of the faith that are foundational. We're looking at the 10 practices, things that Christians do, and 10 virtues, things that maybe the Christian faith should actually show every now and again. And we're doing this because what we're really looking to show people is that Christian faith, it goes beyond just what you believe. It goes beyond what you practice. It's actually about building who you are. It's about building character. We've been doing this for 30 weeks. Like I said, we're going to do it for 30 weeks. We're actually in week 16. And for the first 10 weeks, we looked at these 10 beliefs. And now we're looking at 10 practices, 10 things we should do that mean if we believe those 10 things, then we should probably do something about it. We're in week 6 of these practices. The first 5 weeks, we actually spent talking about different things that the church does or Christians do that help us connect with God. See, this whole series is actually about love God, love people. It's kind of why we're doing it. And the next 5 weeks are going to be talking about how we connect with people. So the first 5 is how we love God more, and the next 5 weeks is how we love people more. Things like sharing our faith, giving our time, giving our resources, and biblical community. Now, like 3 months ago, I actually stood up here and talked on the topic of the church, something that we wanted to just kind of get across of what is church, what is it supposed to do, why does it even exist? And this is where we kind of connect this message into that, is we're now going to be talking about biblical community. So not just church as a body of people, but biblical community. How do we practice that? How do we do church? And we're going to be looking to the Bible to see what it says about church. Something we settled on when we first talked on the topic was church is not a few things. It is not the building that you meet in. It is not the pastor. It is not the songs that you sing. Instead, church is the people. The people that make up a church are its identity, they are its mission, they are its drive. And what we're really talking about is a broken yet beautiful people who are surrounded by like-minded, people that just want to do God's mission, that want to get after something, and that's what unites them together. It's actually quite an amazing thing, and if you didn't get that message or you've missed any of these, you can go to epiphanystation.com and you can view them all, or you can listen to them all online. But really, where this gets exciting when we talk about practices, because community is actually one of the core elements of Epiphany Station's code. This scary-looking LED show on the wall here is our code. It's 10 things that make up who we are as a church, and we have like a pamphlet on it. You can read up on it. But number 8 here is community with the coffee mugs. We believe that church has to be community, and it has to be intentional fellowship. But the question is, how do you do that? How do you do church? How do you build relationships in church any different than how you build them elsewhere? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that is what we're going to talk about. The question is, the key question, what do I build my relationships around at church? For every week in this Believe series, we have a key and core belief, and this week's is that I believe, or I hang out with Christians, or I do church to fulfill God's purpose for my life, for the life of others, and for my community. And we build our relationships at church, we build community at church around a few core things. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the original church to begin with. If you're here with us in the summer, we did a series called Unstoppable. We went through the book of Acts. The book of Acts is just this big narrative of what the very first church did, how they behaved, how they acted, and how they basically spread the gospel and spread the good news from Israel all the way up through Rome. So we're going to be digging into that and taking a look at just what it means to be church. If you've got a Bible with you, you can go to Acts 2:42, otherwise it will be on the screen behind me. It says that all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and to fellowship, and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all of the believers met together in one place, shared everything they had, sold their property and possessions, shared the money with those in need. They worshipped together at the temple each day. They met in homes for the Lord's Supper and shared meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. So the things that this early church did are the things that we've kind of been talking about for these first 5 weeks and practices. They worshiped together. They listened to God's teaching together. They prayed together. They gave stuff away, and they actually shared their faith, is what we'll be talking about in a few weeks here. They did all these things quite simply, yet intentionally. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to other places in the Bible right now. We're going to look at why they did these, why these things were important to forming this different type of community. And really what I want you to think of these things as I highlight them as not just things for us to practice in as a church, but they're also identifiers of a good biblical community. They're things that you should be looking for if you're looking for a church. And if you don't find them at Epiphany Station, then you probably should leave. But when I'm talking about people who call Epiphany Station home, these are things that we should practice. If we see it lacking or we want to make it happen, then we should be the people to be a solution to it. The first thing that a church needs to do is to be united. Jeff gave a message at the end of last year, just after Christmas, called The Main Thing. And his tag was, you got to keep the main thing, and that's the main thing. It's terribly confusing. What he's basically talking about was a church that is not united cannot fulfill what it is called to do. And the reason that we find churches that are not united is because we take our eyes off the main thing. We start having side conversations. We start looking over here and getting distracted, and we have arguments about the color of the carpet. That's what happens in churches, and they take their eyes off what they're actually intended to do, and they become ineffective. So we're going to look at a letter that Paul wrote, the greatest church planter of all time, to one of his favorite churches, and he's basically saying to them, this is how you do church, this is how you do community. And all the letters that we're going to look at, the rest of the text we're going to look today, are all these letters from these leaders and these pioneers of the church, basically saying, do it this way, this is biblical community. Paul starts off in Philippians 2 saying, is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate, and make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another and working together with one mind and purpose? Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your interests, but take an interest in others too. And in this way, you'll have the same attitude that Jesus had. The main thing is Jesus Christ. Everything else is not as important. Everything else pales in comparison, and we need to knock it down the totem pole if we're going to be a unified church and have biblical community. Paul starts this letter to the Philippians by basically saying, if you're going to be a Christ follower, a Christian, you've got to act like Christ. You've got to have the same attitude that he has to fellowship. And that is, you put everything else to the side and make Christ central. So at this point, your opinions and your beliefs and your thoughts on alcohol or language or sports or politics or parenting or vaccines or Israel or gun rights or whether he should have just run the ball are not as important as you think they are. The moment that you're a Christian, the moment that you're part of biblical community, Jesus up here and everything else is a terribly low second. And this is not easy, but it is important. It is important because I believe it's the same attitude Jesus has about you and I. I believe that Jesus could choose to look at me and see the things that he disagrees with, the things wrong with me, the things shameful, the things disagreeable, the sins. But when I say that I want to be one of his kids, I think he sees that thing first. And then we'll have conversations about the other things later. And that's the practice. This is how we choose to engage in community, is viewing people as a believer first. No matter what pins they've got on their lapel, no matter what hats they're wearing, they're a believer first. We can be united around that. Everything else is not as important. Now, it's not going to be easy, and one of the things that I love about the Bible is its relevance in a world that calls it irrelevant and past its due date. Paul also writes a letter to help another church see that this is not going to be easy, but you can't do it the way that you normally do it. You can't do it how you normally function in other communities. In Colossians 3:13, he says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Basically, what he's saying is, before you get too uppity and get too offended and start cutting off relationships and kicking people out of fellowship, how's about you show them a little bit of grace? For the love of God and for Christ's sake, choose to be unified first. Show the benefit of the doubt, give grace, and build that into all of your relationships at church. You look at these people in Acts, the things that get listed about what they do, they are all central towards the faith. They are all putting Christ on the pedestal, putting him first, and nothing else is mentioned. And this is how they basically choose to put mission before preference and welcome in other people who are not like them. When the church first began, it was a small group of Jews. And then they started talking to people, and like that in a day, 3,000 people from all around the area, different cultures, different languages, joined the church. What they maybe realize is if we're not intentional about this, these people are going to feel unwelcome, and they're going to feel like we're going to have to jump through hoops to be church. That's why we have so many letters, so many instructions about making sure that we do church right. The second thing that we have to be, that a church will be, if it's good biblical community, is it will be active. It'll do stuff. A church that is stagnant, a church that is just quiet and ineffective, it's dead. There's nothing to it. And the reason that we know this is because we see it in our daily lives. When we want to have a relationship with someone, want to have community with something, it takes a few things. And it usually just takes doing things together to begin with. Now, you weren't friends with little Jimmy Snotface down the street because of his hygiene and his character. You were there because he was there, and you did stuff together. And sometimes he could get a loogie to go all the way to the floor and suck it back up. That's why you were friends with Jimmy Snotface. There's also a good reason why in our early 20s, we start to realize that a lot of our high school friendships are bottoming out. Because we don't do stuff with them anymore. It was based on doing stuff. And that's one of the fundamental things we see in this early church is they did lots of stuff together. They tried to incorporate every daily activity with other people. So what did they do? They ate food, they listened to God, they worshiped together, they prayed, they gave stuff away, and they served. And this is why you will hear us pound the drum of GPS groups like nothing else. Our GPS groups are our small groups of people that meet in people's homes, very similar to this, throughout the week to do this kind of stuff together, to eat together, to live together, to get into each other's lives, to serve and to grow. We have so many reasons for that. The primary is that Sunday, although it be good, it is not the pinnacle of biblical community. You cannot have biblical community the way the Bible instructs it to on a Sunday morning. We do a very good effort, and you guys are great, but we need to go further and get into one another's lives. Sunday morning is the open door. It's the threshold of church community. GPS groups, authentic manhood, youth group, prayer, all these other things, these are the living room. They're the den, they're the workshop, they're the man cave, they're the kitchen of biblical community where stuff actually happens. And that's why we call so many times for people to get into community. We see throughout the scriptures, I'm going to list out 3 other letters to churches instructing people how to do this and what to do. In Galatians, we see Paul write, share each other's burdens and in this way obey the law of Christ. Hebrews, we read, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. To the church in Thessalonica, we read, so encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. You can't do that stuff unless you're active and you're together and you're close and you're in each other's lives. The idea of church is you're supposed to have family here, not people that you just acknowledge for an hour on a Sunday morning. Because really in the faith, it's difficult enough and you need people who've got your back. You need people who are there to support you, and that's what church is. It's supposed to be family, not an organization. And speaking to the person who has been burned by church community, because we're all there. We've all been there, most of us. I'd say give it another shot. We talked about church when I talked about it 3 months ago, and basically one of the things was be patient and build trust slowly. It takes time, but you have to choose to engage into it and to be active with them. All of our GPS groups, Authentic Manhood, Youth Group, all the information is in a Get Connected pamphlet on the front there. You can also find it online. But we really, really do strive to see people growing into these small families of faith. The third thing is about a church, good identifier, and something that we need to be active in is for it to be growing. And here I'm not talking about your classic, attendance and tithe and all of that nonsense. What I'm talking about is the people. Are the people growing? As we go through this series, it's very intentional that first we look at 10 beliefs, and these 10 beliefs call us to these 10 actions, and these 10 actions build in us these 10 virtues. And it's very top down, but really the way I've been looking at it over this last week and how I work personally is sometimes the action has to go before the belief. Sometimes when you don't fully believe, engaging in things and acting in things actually cement that belief for you. I'm a poster child of cynicism and skepticism. I'm working on changing that to something like curiosity because it looks better on a resume, but still, I struggle, and very early young man, I didn't have much love for God and not much love for people, and then I married a woman who loves both, and that was really tricky. So when we started engaging in planning social activities together, we had very different mindsets of a good time. And she'd say things like, we should invite so-and-so from the church and we can hang out and maybe we can go to dinner and then we can come back and we can play a board game and we can talk and we can really get to know them. I said, that sounds great. But why don't instead we go watch movies in the basement and tell nobody that we're home? Anyone resonate? Anyone? Thank you very much. And what I've found, especially with biblical community and things like Bible reading and giving of my resources, my beliefs were not to the point that I was ready to engage in them, so I was pushed to engage in them first. And nothing more than seeing the benefits of biblical community once I was in it did I see why I believed in it and why I needed to believe in it. Faith is hard. Nothing about the Christian faith is easy. Nothing in the Bible says it's going to be easy. In fact, it goes out of its way to say it's difficult. But it also goes out of its way to say you need people with you to do this thing. It is not a solo sport. And there's a couple of ways I'm going to highlight here in which being in community, being in biblical community can actually help you grow as an individual. The first is in your teachability. Now, teachability, basically, as you round it out, is who do you give credibility to teach you anything? Who has the right to say, when they say something like that is a word of wisdom that I'm willing to take on? Now, I'll say this right away. If that list at Epiphany Station is limited to people with a title, or it's me, Jeff, or Ben, you are severely under-resourcing yourself because we are not that smart. I find more wisdom and more teaching from the people of Epiphany Station when they engage in me with what's going on in their lives and what God is teaching them and how they have a word of conviction for me than I get from my pastors. And teachability takes humility because it's the choice to say that I believe that, quite frankly, everybody has the ability to teach me something. Some people, you need to shove some of that in the trash can. But if you say that about everyone and you stifle yourself with pride, you actually don't grow as quickly and as deeply as you can. The second thing is accountability. Now, accountability is a scary word. Because accountability basically means that you give somebody the right to hold you to account for your actions and the path that you say you want to walk on. We find a couple of biblical forms of accountability, and we're going to look at the first one because the first one is maybe the trickiest one for us and where some of us have pain and hurt from the past. It's in Galatians 6, it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. Be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself." The reason that is negative and scary for a lot of us is because it has been abused and it has been done wrong. And we have been shamed and we have been disgraced and we have been chewed out. And you'll find actually in this instruction to walk each other in accountability, it says gently, it says humbly, which basically means that you're not coming down on people telling them that they're a disgrace. This is why you need to build a small group of people who know you intimately. It took me 2 years to find my first accountability partner. And then he up and left in Montana for no good reason whatsoever. Ugly, ugly place. It took me another 2 years to find the two current guys that I call accountability partners. It takes time because you have to build trust. You have to know you're all going in the same direction. But there's nothing like them bringing stuff to me because they know who I am, they know how I hear things, and they know how to talk to me and how to walk me on the right path, as opposed to somebody who's bringing it from their own shame or their own hurt from what I've been saying or doing. The other form is much more positive and proactive from our side of things, and it's basically us owning up to stuff in accountability. It's knowing where your boundaries are, and when you cross them, you going to someone and saying, here's what I did wrong this week. I did that thing again. I'm really struggling in this area. And it is not easy, but it is much better than getting slapped up the back of the head by Josh Carlhagen when you've done something wrong. I tell you, that thing hurts. So when I've got accountability and I do this, I look at James 5:16. It actually says, you are the one that's supposed to go and own up to things before people catch you in the act. It says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. What it is basically saying is you get to have these people in your life that you know love you. They hold you accountable and they pray for you and they support you because they love you and they want to see you walk the path that you said you want to walk and that Christ says we're to try and walk. So at that point, that's what we call good community. There's people around you like that. And like I said, it takes time and it takes patience and it takes knowing who to trust. But it is essential to growth. So you might have noticed if you've been at Epiphany Station for a while that we're actually quite interested in equipping people with practical things to do as we kind of leave teachings hanging out there. And this week it's actually something more practical and more committing than anything we have done in a while. And you might not hear this in church again, but if you have a smartphone, I'd like you to take your phone out, please. And then we're going to get the app where we can all do this and be like Hairball concert. Who went to Hairball last night? Come on. Guilty pleasure. Okay. But during this Believe series, we're actually being resourced by a company called Zondervan, and they've been sending us the graphics and the Believe book and the GPS questions and things like that. And what they've actually created is an app to go along with this entire series. And you can search in the App Store or in Google Play for the Christian Life Profile Assessment. And you'll find that in there, and it is this great tool that I'm going to tell you a little bit about, but if you're in a GPS group or Authentic Manhood or in youth group, you're going to hear more about it in your next gathering. This app is purposeful to help you grow and also to help you have accountability for your growth. So Ben's got a couple of pictures that he's going to throw up so you have a visual. If you're downloading it, you can see that. That's what it looks like when it's downloaded, so you know that you're in the right app and you're not just pouring out your information to something weird. And once you go into that, you'll see the name of it all looks very official and very Believe. And what it actually is as you engage in it and you do the profile assessment, it's actually a series of questions that will help highlight some areas in your faith for you to work on. Now, this is a private assessment. Nobody sees these details. But when you take the assessment, it'll ask you to choose a church that you're a part of that's a part of Believe, and hopefully you'll choose Epiphany Station. Otherwise, that'd be kind of weird. You take this assessment, it's all private to you, but the intention is then it pings you back a few things that you can start working on. So just throw the next one up, Ben. So as you open up the home screen, the Christian Life Profile is under My Programs, and then you click on that and you take the assessment, it will ping you back 3 things. Out of all the beliefs, all the practices, and all the virtues we're going to talk about, 3 things for you to work on. And here are mine. Apparently, I need to grow in self-control, patience, and gentleness. And that's a bunch of hooey, and I'm not going to listen to it, and it's nonsense! Now, you can look at this and you can get offended, and you can take it as we're trying to rate and rank people, but really the tool is intentional about you being able to choose growth if you want to. So you can take these 3 things and you can dismiss them if you want, or you can start engaging in a few things to help you grow in these areas. So next one, Ben, if you will. So my virtue of self-control, it gives you things like the core belief, and then it gives you something to basically talk about as this is what the belief of self-control is. And then as you go down, it'll give you things that you can use to seek accountability within the group, within Epiphany Station. You can have Bible texts that you can meditate on. You can have things to pray about, things to memorize. And really the intention is whatever your weakness is, you get to find an area in which you can grow and you engage in that. And even though, as Jeff and I took this test together, I said, wouldn't it be funny if mine came back with just 3 virtues that I suck at? And it did. And then I felt really bad about myself until I heard that a certain worship pastor that I know came back with the practice of worship. I felt a lot better about myself. Shouldn't usually mock the one in charge of all the tech, but there you go. So, the idea and the kind of the ultimate thing is within this, you get to create groups of accountability. So when your small group, your authentic manhood, your youth group, or just a small group of you, even husband and wife and engaged couples or whatever, you can just have a small group that you share this kind of information with each other. So people can hold you accountable to growing in these areas. So really what we're talking about here and what we're bringing together in the whole message is you can do these things if you want to. If you don't, it yields no benefit to you. It yields no benefit to the church or the world. What we're talking about is choosing to be unified, choosing to make the main thing, choosing to be active and close and doing stuff together, also choosing growth and letting people help you grow. I once had a conversation with one of my best friends, and he basically broke down into tears and said, I've been here a few years and I have no community. I have no close friends. I have no church family here. I said, what about me? Aren't I enough? No. But as we went into the conversation, I said, that sucks. What are you going to do about it? And he did something about it. He intentionally chose to be proactive about finding community. He created an accountability group. He engaged in groups he was currently in at a deeper level, and he took his GPS group deeper. That's what it takes from all of us, is to be not just complainers and seeing the faults and the flaws in our biblical community, but being a part of the solution and being intentional and deliberate about making the church everything it's supposed to be. Would you guys please pray with me? Father God, I thank you for community and how you model community, how you're a God of relationship and how that's how we're supposed to function in your image. I thank you that you've pulled people together here who want to have each other's backs, who want to support each other, who want to see each other grow. And then when we hit the valleys, we have people around us, and when we're doing well, we're there to support one another like family. We ask that you'll be working conviction in us this week, that we will see that if we want to do this, if we want to engage in the faith, if we want to grow, we will find community and we will be intentional about it. In Jesus' name we thank you. Amen.